Hello everybody and welcome back to another King's War Battle Report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have the Ratkin versus the Brotherhood. As is common on this channel, we played at 20 to 50 points, and the scenario was Invade. Here we see a rough approximation of the Brotherhood list. I couldn't figure out what the last 25 points were, but close enough. And we're starting off with 2 hordes of Lane Bowmen, followed by 2 hordes of Order of the Brotherhood, 1 with Brew of Sharpness, 1 with Brew of Strength, followed by a troop of Abyssal Hunt, and then a troop of Order of Redemption with the Brew of Haste, a regiment of Order of the Forsaken, 1 Blaine Siege Artillery, 1 Forsaken Beast with Regen and Breath Attack, an Exemplar of the Brotherhood with a Horse, of course, and a Blade of the Beast Slayer, and then 2 Devoted, both on horses, both with Martyr's Prayer, 1 with Inspiring Talisman. I'm not exactly sure how competitive this list is, as my opponent was both a very, very new player. In fact, I played him his first game of Kings of War last week, and I don't know that much about Brotherhood. I think I've only played 3 or 4 games against them, and all of them have been newer players that are just getting into the game. So if I mess up any names, or if you go, why does he have that unit, I honestly couldn't tell you. So moving on. This is the same rat list I played in the last battle report against the Varangar, but I'll go over it anyway. I start off with 8 regiments of Tunnel Slaves, followed by 2 hordes of Shock Troops, a horde of Blight with the Caterpillar Potion, 2 regiments of Vermintide, 2 Death Engines, both with Vile Sorcery, 2 Warlocks, 1 with the Inspiring Talisman, and a Swarm Crier on Fleabag with the Loot, and then some allies in the horde of Darkside Chariots and an ASB. Yeah, I kind of like how this list works out, although I've been, playing some other armies for this event I'm going to go to in August. But this, I like rats, I like hordes, so it worked in the last report and a couple of battles that I didn't end up putting on this channel, so I hope you like it as well. Here we see the end of deployment. I did remember to take a picture this time. So let's just start with the rats. From left to right, we've got the 1st Regiment of Slaves, followed by the stand-in for my Darkside Chariots. I still haven't had a chance to really figure out what I'm going to do there. I'm not sure whether I'm going to make more Rat Chariots, or if I'm actually going to make some Elf Chariots. I can do either. But anyway, so that's what those are. That guy that's sort of bisected right in his midsection, that is my Elf ASB. I haven't had a chance to glue them back together yet. Those little robots in the front, those are my stand-in for the Vermin Swarm, because I was actually planning to play a Dwarf list tonight, and I forgot some of the bases for that, so I ended up having to play my Ratkin, and then I forgot the Vermin Swarm, so just bear with those. Behind them, we've got the 1st Death Engine. To the right of that, the Blight, of course, which I've begun painting. Then I have 5 more regiments of Slaves. Behind them, the 2 hordes of Shock Troops. Behind them is the ASB on Fleabag. And then we've got the 2nd Death Engine, that is the Blimp. The Blimp is actually appearing in this instead of just his base, so good job him. Then we've got the 2 Warlocks around him, and then I think off to the right, slightly off frame, are the last 2 regiments of Slaves. On the Brotherhood side, starting from left to right, I think that's the Order of Abyssal Hunt there, that you can see peeking out behind that, to the left of that little ruined tower. Behind that is the Regiment of Order of the Forsaken. Behind that is the Siege Engine, then the 1st Horde of Brotherhood Knights. Those are the +1 to hit. Then we've got the Redemption Knights in the back there, the Grail Knight guys. In front of them is the Exemplar. Then the next Horde of Brotherhood Knights, again with the Brew of Strength. Behind them is, behind each of these hordes is is 1 Devoted each. One's on a unicorn, 1 is just on a horse. Then we've got the 1st Horde of Bowmen in the woods, to the right of that, the next Horde of Bowmen, and then the Forsaken Beast. My opponent here, I actually did try a lot to, sort of help him with this list and help him with deployment, but this is one of those guys that just sort of wants to put stuff on the table, see how it plays out, and wants to know it for himself. He doesn't really want my help beyond, rule help or just minor adjustments during the game, so I'm not sure about his deployment here. It's pretty aggressive, with no inspiring on the right side there, and barely any inspiring in the list on the whole. I think he only has 1 unit, or the Devoted with the Inspiring Talisman, that's it. So yeah, that'll probably be the first thing that he'll add in. But anyway, turn 1. So rats win the roll-off for going first, and one of the things I like about this list is that when I'm not facing off against a lot of shooting, I mean, he has an okay amount, but it's not, like a goblin shooting list or elves. I pretty much just get to march forward in my line. I get to put down the first regiment of slaves, measure it out, and then the rest just sort of lock in like Tetris blocks. So I like that. It's a nice feeling. Pretty much everything runs here, except for the elves who stay in the back to shoot, and the death engine on the left there, and the vermin swarm in front of it. Those obviously don't run because they can't. That little patch of grass there with the fence next to it is height 0 terrain, so can't march into it without Pathfinder. Here we're just showing off both the warlocks fire off. Only one has range on the Brotherhood, the horde of knights over there, which that was just a mistake on my part. I should have made it so I had range with both, but I didn't. So one of them shoots at those knights, getting 1 or 2 damage, and then the other one shoots at the little bowman in the woods, and I think I still got 2 damage through, even on the 5s to hit. So, and yeah, the elf chariots here, the Darkside chariots, they actually, I'm sorry, I misspoke. They did have to move. Maybe that previous picture wasn't them moving yet, because obviously I have to move forward to get some shots off. And I just plink them into the horde of knights, because they're the only thing in range. So yeah, I do 2 or 3 damage. I don't roll boxcars on any of these, so they're fine. Moving on, this is Brotherhood turn 1, and the first thing you might notice is right there in center frame is that the regiment of Order of the Forsaken are on a horde tray. I didn't ask for my opponent's list. Obviously, he had used either Battlescribe or Easy Army, something like that. So I thought this was a horde of Forsaken Knights, and I was quite worried that I had blundered that hard to allow this into me. But in reality, it ended up being a regiment, which I don't quite know yet. So I'm really worried about this. Otherwise, he just sort of moves forward with everything. Some of his knights, like the Order of the Redemption, get in front of his horde, I guess, to block a little bit. And we adjusted the terrain. I actually meant for a horde of knights to be able to fit between the tower and that rock. So I had to push it back. The keen-eyed among you might have noticed that. So the exemplar there charges into a regiment of slaves, and I think that this is a pretty terrible idea, because I can always just charge him with that rat swarm, or the vermin swarm, and then my second regiment of slaves, and that'll be 39 attacks, 9 of which have vicious. Granted, they hit on 5s, but it's only in 11, 13 to break, so I don't know about that move. It's very aggressive, I'll give him that. And over here, the bowman obviously sits still, while the Forsaken Beast moves forward to just get some shots onto some rats. Both of his wizards, instead of trying to cast any Martyr's Prayer, I had only done 1 or 2 wounds to each of the hordes of Brotherhood Knights, so he just casts his heal 2 and heals those off. So there's still 2 wounds on the bowman, but all the 3 extra wounds I did on the Brotherhood Knights are gone. And yeah, here's his shooting. He fires 1 horde of bowmen into my rat swarm, does 4 wounds to them, and does manage to waver them, so that's good for him. They are very trapped, though. They can't go backwards because the blight are in their way. They can't go to the right, they can't go to the left, and they can't go forward, so they're just going to be sitting there. Here, yeah, the mighty exemplar does 1 wound to a slave, doesn't, waver it, so they'll be charging back in there. Slaves do what they do. And here, yeah, he only does 5 wounds to the blight, and at this point I'm really confused, because that's a horde of, in my mind, that's a horde of Order of the Forsaken, and I'm like, man, he must have really flubbed those rolls. So, yeah, a little confused. But, I mean, I do have Ensnare, so it could happen. And turn 2. So, yes, the rats pretty much just charge in on the left here. I send the leftmost vermin swarm and the blight obviously back into the Forsaken. He couldn't actually... you can't legally put your unit in a place where I can't countercharge you, so when he... because those rats in the little vermin swarm in the middle there can't move at all because it's wavered, you actually can't roll that far back. So the blight charge in, we fudge it a little bit. Anyway, that's how that happened. I send I countercharge with the slaves that got charged by the Exemplar, and then I also send another regiment of slaves into the side of them, just to get that 30 attacks, and also to move forward a bit with these slaves. I want him to, obviously I want him charging slaves rather than any of my other stuff, and I also want him to be a bit farther back away from my death engines, but within range of those shock troops. Speaking of the shock troops, I varied their position a little bit. One is a bit farther up, while one is a bit farther back, and the idea here is that the rightmost unit, if he, for whatever reason, if he sends that horde of Brotherhood into the side of, or into the slaves that are fighting that Exemplar, I can easily just countercharge back in, even if he falls back D3. So that's the idea. Speaking of that, I decided to sort of move these slave regiments around a little bit to block his charge arcs. It might not look like it, and I think I ended up rolling the shock troops back a little bit from this picture, but yeah, I made it so he can't squeeze by with his Forsaken Beast to charge into my shock troops. I don't think that he can take me in a fight, but I just don't want him charging me, because the hordes of shock troops are they're very deadly, but they're pretty difficult to get around stuff like single monsters, and I plan to just shoot that thing to death instead of actually trying to fight it. Yep, just showing off that charge, and this one. And here, yes, I end up doing 6 wounds to the Exemplar, so pretty good for slaves, but we merely waver it, so that's unfortunate. And here, yeah, this is when I learned that it's a regiment of Order of the Forsaken, not a horde, when he tells me that the nerve value is a 1214, and I'm like, nah, that can't be right, but yeah, it was a regiment, so the Blight easily blew through it. I actually tried to get a Crush 1 from the loot onto my Blight, but I double won that one. And there isn't a picture of it, I don't believe. Nope, sorry, let's roll one back. There isn't a picture of it, but if we look here, I end up shooting the Blimp and both my Warlocks at his Forsaken Beast, and I do 10 wounds, and it's only a 14-16, so, pretty good. But, yeah, I end up just getting a waiver. I roll an exact 4, in fact, so almost don't get the waiver. And, I mean, that's okay. My Chariots and Death Engine there shoot at the Brotherhood, the Horde of Brotherhood with the Brew of Sharpness that are directly in front of them on the left there. I don't do that many wounds, though, so I think it's pretty inconsequential. And back to Brotherhood. Yeah, I did 6 wounds, so I guess that's not that inconsequential, but they are 22-24, so not great yet, and he does have 2 Martyr's Prayer. So I end up moving forward with the Vermin Swarm, and a little bit back with the Blight, so he has to charge into the Vermin Swarm if he wants to charge. He easily makes it, obviously, and he's just going to rip right through the 32 attacks on 3s. Yeah. The Redemption Knights charge into my other Vermin Swarm, who couldn't move, so they're probably also toast. And here we're seeing a bit of a weird move by my opponent. I try to talk him into just going for my slaves down there in the bottom left corner, because he can charge into him. He'll easily kill either of these regiments that he charges, and if he charges them, he'll blow right through them and be able to back up. I can charge him maybe with my shock troops, but, maybe not. And on top of this, I think that his archers were already, or I guess they're crossbowmen, but they're still called bowmen. I think they can easily rip through this regiment as well. So I just don't understand why even do this, but whatever. He does what he does. Over here, we're showing off, the Forsaken Knights, Abyssal Hunt, sorry, not Forsaken Knights. The Abyssal Hunt, I had a regiment of slaves over here on the left just to try to protect my chariots a little bit, and this turn he just charges them in the front and rolls out the box immediately, removes them, so they're gone. And let's roll one back. He also has, these trays are too small. We did a big tray order, and unfortunately it didn't arrive on the day of this game. It arrived the next day, so he didn't have the correct trays for a lot of these things, but he's just learning the game, so. Yeah, surprising no one, this horde of horses just blow right through that Vermin Swarm, so yeah, they're gone. I think he chose to back up D3 here, backs up 1. And the Redemption Knights blow right through the other one and decide to go forward so the Blight can charge them and not the horde of Knights. Although I'm not sure I would charge the Horde of Knights anyway, as they're in the middle of that rough terrain. So I'd probably charge the Redemption anyway. So, whatever. Yes, I don't even make him roll the attacks here. He's got 64, crush 1 attacks, and then the bowman. So, I just tell him to double 1 it, and he doesn't. So that regiment of slaves is gone. He reforms the knights so they can, take a charge on the front side of the flank, and decides to move the bowman back a little bit. I guess I could get a flank charge with one of the regiment of slaves, but I don't know. Maybe we reformed it again so it wasn't a flank charge. Turn 3. Yeah, that we definitely angled it a bit better after that picture was taken. So his Forsaken Beast was wavered last turn. The regen, unfortunately for him, only heals 2 off, so he's still sitting on 8. I move the slaves that he shot with the Forsaken Beast. They charge that center bowman horde with the 2 wounds on them, because the ones that were a bit farther forward that might have had a flank charge onto his Brotherhood horde just charge the other bowman. I just want to get them locked down, especially as we're playing Invade, so I need to be over there anyway. And then I bring one of my regiments of slaves. You can see them peeking out slightly to the right of that little wizard tower. I just bring them around to mess around with the Forsaken Beast in case I don't kill them, or the archers, or whatever needs to be done. They're there for it. And then move 1 regiment of slaves forward in front of the blimp just to block a charge. So with that said, moving into the center, I end up charging his horde of Brotherhood with the Brew of Strength with one of my hordes of shock troops. Excuse me. And a regiment of slaves just to, get the extra attacks. I think they were in the way. So they both go in there. I send my slaves back into the Exemplar, who actually last turn, I didn't take a picture of it, but he passed his Headstrong and charged back into the slaves, doing 2 more wounds. So, he's slowly, I guess, winning that fight. I think he's been casting some Martyr's Prayer now and removed like 5 or 6 wounds off of that Exemplar. So, the initial slaves doing 6 wounds, it's not exactly as it seems. In the middle there, I swivel around the other horde of shock troops just in case this flank crumbles, like the Blight can't hold it. So, swivel them around to deal with these knights, and the Blight themselves go into the front of the Redemption Knights, and when we measure it out for my Death Engine, because I was trying to see whether the Death Engine could charge or not, it turns out that the Death Engine was in the flank of this Redemption Knight, and there's a perfect, chariot-sized gap, so almost exactly 50 millimeters between his horde of knights and my Blight, so I can just sort of run forward, or I guess not 50, but you get the idea, because run forward, pivot on my center, and then move into it. So that's, 75-ish millimeter. So yeah, that was very nice for me. It just fit in there real snug. And here, just showing off the charges again. Boop, boop, boop. I end up doing 1 wound, I think, to the Exemplar, but it, she just shrugs it off, so it's pretty irrelevant. And here, just showing off that charge. And I did 1 or 2 wounds here. I think I actually boxcarded the roll to waver them, so that's nice for me. And here I end up doing 1 extra wound, so I stopped them from shooting, but otherwise nothing else. Don't even waver them. My shock troops, they did get +1 crushing, and the slaves contributed 1 or 2 extra wounds, so I end up doing pretty decently. It's 13 wounds onto this horde, but I don't even waver them. But they don't have, all they have is the crush 1. They won't have the thunder 2, so I'm not too afraid. And just showing off, I did in fact do 1 wound. I don't waver her, so she's gonna get back into my slaves. And here we see Abyssal, or not Abyssal, I was thinking Abyssal Hunt here. The Brotherhood turn 3, where he got a charge back into my chariots. I couldn't stop. I could charge into his horde of Brotherhood with my horde of chariots, but I would have been hindered on the charge because of that little bit of crop, I guess. So I would have been hindered on this charge anyway, and then I wouldn't have been able to shoot. It just wasn't worth it. So I just set myself up so I could take a front charge from the horde of Brotherhood and or the Abyssal Hunt as well, just to raise my survivability. He takes it with the Brotherhood, doesn't send the Horde in at all. The Horde go into my Blight. That seems pretty obvious. My Blight blew right through that regiment, or that troop of Redemption, along with my Death Engine. The Death Engine went forward as far as it could on its overrun, and the Blight just sort of stared down this Horde. So yeah, he goes into the Blight here. He has -2 to hit, but +1, so that'll put him on 4s with 32 attacks. I mean, the Blight already have 5 wounds on him. I'm not too keen on this. Like, what is that? That's 16 hits and then 3 off, so he'll deal around 13 wounds on average. So that puts me on an 18. I'm a dash 23 right now. Yeah, that's not good math. So I'm not, too keen on the Blight surviving it. Over here, his knights countercharge the shock troops, just trying to take down the actual, viable target. So fair enough. And he countercharges with the horde of bowmen. We slide them down in a second here. It's just before the picture. And here we can see the outcome, which is he puts 5 wounds onto my chariot with the troop of Abyssal Hunt. It doesn't get a waiver, so they'll be getting charged again next turn. And yeah, he decimates this regiment, or this horde of Blight. It was, I think he hit like 31 out of 32 attacks, or some crazy amount. On at least one of these charges he hit with 31. And I think it was this one. So yeah, he just decimates this unit. It's gone. I guess obliterates it. Doesn't even decimate it. Over here, yeah, he ends up, the stupid Exemplar kills my slaves. I guess not the stupid Exemplar. The stupid slaves died to my Exemplar. And I really needed this not to happen, because on the overrun, he ends up in front of my shock troop horde, which, no matter how I charge this, I'm out of 6 of his horde of knights, the Brotherhood over there by my Death Engine, which means that currently nothing can charge that horde of knights, because my Death Engine is facing to the right, towards that Warlock there, and this little Exemplar is in my way otherwise, so that's pretty unfortunate for me, but, it happens. Also, I don't think it was unlikely. Like, the slaves were sitting on like 4 or 5 wounds, and I think, he's got 3 attacks, and it was only a 13, 15 at the time. So, okay dice, but not great. Yeah, over here we can see that he sends the horde of crushing knights into the shock troops, does 9 wounds to them, and rolls pretty high on the break check, but doesn't quite get the waiver, because right now I think that they're on the regular 20-22. So that was lucky for me. Yeah, he doesn't even waiver these slaves. In fact, he doesn't even wound them, which means that were they armed with guns, they could shoot them. And we move on to turn 4. I know that little die in the middle says 5. I gotta get rid of this thing. I only had it to annoy people in War Machine, so gotta stop using it. Yeah, my chariots countercharge into the Abyssal Hunt Knights, because why not? And I move the little half-elf there, but forward to block the charge of the Brotherhood horde. They can still overrun into my chariots if they charge him as they need, but they'll need a 4+. So I just made it a 50-50 chance. So seemed good enough to me. Over here, yep, the horde of shock troops charge into that Exemplar with 4 wounds on him. And yes, I just do this charge again. The shock troops and the regiment of slaves go back into the horde of Brotherhood. They were on 13 wounds. He has cast Martyr's Prayer to heal, 5 wounds off. So, Martyr's Prayer, what you gonna do? Over here, I decided, since 1 regiment of slaves got the waiver, 2 regiments of slaves will probably get the break, right? So they go in, that regiment of slaves on the left there, it's about to charge into the bowman horde in the woods. Sorry, a little stuffed up. I'm not sure. Oh, this is this is, if we roll back a few, right here, you can see that little warlock in the bottom picture there. He's decided to just start sniping out these wizards, because Martyr's Prayer is put 1, I think, on 8 or 9 wounds, and the other one sitting on 5. So getting 1 lightning bolt wound in, ends in a pretty good chance of breaking him. So that's what happens. Oop. Yeah, I shoot down the unicorn one. So I guess that was the correct one, as it was on the wrong base size anyway. I don't end up doing anything to the other wizard. And here, yep, we're showing off the 2 regiments do in fact kill that bowman horde, so kudos to me. And this regiment, yep, takes out the other bowman horde, so slaves. These guys were pretty vicious. I think that this slave regiment in particular hit like 11 out of 15 5+ attacks, and the other 2 hit like, I don't know, 15-ish. So they, slaves were done with these serfs. They just wanted them up. In fact, serfs up. Over here, yep, my horde of shock troops. I don't even roll the slaves, I don't think. Just blow right through that horde of knights, getting them to double 1 town. And this is the turn 4 for Brotherhood. He sends the Order of Abyssal Hunt back into my chariots. I did end up doing quite a few wounds on them. You can see I've done 7 with the chariots, even without Thunderous Charge. So that was really good, but I don't waver them, so, unfortunate. The Horde of Brotherhood go into my stupid elf ASB, so that'll show it. I've done a couple of wounds, I think, by shooting at it with my Death Engine, but, not enough to actually scare it, as it's just been Martyr's Praying its wounds back. And yeah, his Rock Lava, I actually forgot to mention this. Turn 1, he hit the blimp for 6 wounds with his little artillery piece, and turn 4, he hits it for 8 wounds, and yeah, the blimp is no more. So, unfortunate. Sitting on top. Who would have guessed that a giant blimp on top of a hill would just be an easy target for rocks? Yeah, so he easily blows through the ASB, and then overruns, gets the 4+, gets into my chariots, and these 2 just bomb right through them. So they're turning back to face, and turn 5 begins for the Ratkin. I like this picture because it sort of shows, in my mind, how I thought this list would work, where, although, I have more slaves out here than I think I would have in an average game, but the idea is that, you can kill as many slaves as you want, but they're not really going to do anything, and if you let them go, they still have 15 attacks on a 5+, so they're still pretty decent. And this is just waves and waves of rats coming back to beat down these elite troops. Yeah, I end up taking this charge with the shock troops, the unwounded shock troops, and the another regiment of slaves into his +1 to hit knights. And everything else just sort of moves forward. I get my ASB forward to, give rally, or give inspiring, but also to get that loot in action. And my little sniper warlock up there in the middle, towards the top of the picture. Yeah, he's got line of sight back onto that damsel. Gonna try to slap 1 more wound onto her, get himself a second one. Otherwise, my Death Engine, my remaining Death Engine, and other warlock, the Inspiring Talisman warlock, are on the hill and just being hyped for to shoot at the Order of Abyssal Hunt Knights, just to make sure that he has nothing. Yep, just showing up the charge. And I end up doing, let's walk 1 back. Yeah, he must have Martyr's Prayed the wounds off this unit, because I think they were on 5 last I checked. And I ended up doing 10 wounds, so pretty good, again, especially because if we walk, yeah, I screwed up this charge. I did roll the dice correctly, but I screwed up this charge because the shock troops should be a little bit farther towards the bottom of the picture, which puts them into the woods. I just messed up when I was placing the units because I thought I was going to... Anyway, I should have put my ASB there to stop them from getting the -1, but I did roll the 5+ to hit here, so don't worry too much about that. I do 10 wins to them, but I don't get the boxcars I need to waver them, so they're fine. And turn 6, let's actually walk 1 back. So I actually do end up shooting down these Order of Abyssal Hunt using the 1 Warlock and 1 Death Engine on 5+, and the other Warlock does in fact snipe off the last Devoted, so it is just this horde of Brotherhood left on the table for turn 6. So I forgot to take a picture of his countercharge. He just charges into the shock troops and does some wounds, but it doesn't break them. Yeah, he does a lot of wounds, actually. That's insane. It does 14 wounds to my horde of shock troops, but unfortunately it doesn't even waver them. So on my turn 6, I just send the shock troop as a countercharge, the regiment of slaves, and my Death Engine into these knights, and yeah, we do an obscene number of wounds and just blow right through it. And this is the last picture of the battle, so I hope you guys liked it. It was a pretty stunning victory for the Ratkin, but again, my opponent was very new. Kings of War is not a big game in my area just yet, so If you guys liked it, feel free to leave a comment. If you have any suggestions or ideas, do that as well. I always like hearing from you. All right, till next time.